Welcome to Raven Talk, the official podcast of the Raven Tribe. The Raven Tribe is a home for warriors on the path, and is dedicated to training warriors for the battlefield of life. Visit us on the web at theraventribe.com, where you can learn more information on membership, warrior training, as well as links to our official YouTube channel, Facebook group, apparel store, and our official bookstore, Marshall Books. Welcome back, Tribe. Today we're here with special guest Maestro James Loriega and special guest co-host Hanjido. Today we're going to be discussing Esgrima Criolla, which is a knife fighting art from South America, specifically from Argentina. We're going to be addressing this with Maestro Loriega, who is world-renowned for his research into various fighting arts, specifically edge weapon fighting arts. Maestro Loriega, how are you today?
Good evening, Fernand. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. Good to have you back on, and we look forward to talking about this topic. So it's my understanding, sir, that you've been doing some research into this, field of knife work for some time, and we look forward to talking to you about your research, what you found, what your thoughts are on this art. A lot of people I don't think have heard of this art, and I'm real excited about getting some information out there to our listening audience. So,
well, it'll be my pleasure to share whatever I have with you for now.
Great. Excellent. So, sir, now this art is known to me as Esgrima Criolla, which translates from Spanish to basically Creole fencing or Creole fighting. What is the proper name of this art? Is that the correct name for this, the way the people in Argentina train this? Is that what they refer to it as?
Well, some in Argentina refer to it that way, but the people who refer to it as Esgrima Criolla, and I will be referring to it that way only because it's convenient. But that's just a regular, actually it's a new term. There are three terms for the art. The first is Esgrima Criolla, as you say, and it does mean made of fencing. People want to know, this is a knife fighting technique. Why do they call it fencing? They call it fencing. They call it esgrima because saying esgrima is easier than saying method of fighting with a knife. Okay, so it's shorthand. Now, the criolla part, many people assume that it's because it's native to Argentina. And in part, it is. But there's more to it. When they say criolla, it's more like saying this is ours. This is not Spanish. So there's an ethnocentric element in the term. That's one of the three terms. The next term, a more common term, before Esgrima Criolla came into being, was simply duelo criollo. Duelo criollo was the term that was used in the 19th century. And that was because most of the fighting was in a dual form. It was about honor, it was about insult, it's about, it seemed to have a reason for the fighting. So by using the word duelo or duel, they sort of like legitimized the act of fighting. The third term, which is the real term for the art, is the term that the gauchos themselves use. And that is visteo or visteo. And that is meant to refer to the fact that eyesight, vista, is above all else the most highly developed attribute for fighting. If a fighter develops their sight so that through experience they can foresee and predict what the opponent is going to do, he's going to win. And if the fighter does not develop his eyesight where he can pick up the small body language then he's going to be at the mercy of his opponent, who can use paints and subterfuge to defeat him.
So, Mr. Loriega, this amazing complexity of terminology. Is this art based on mostly the Spanish bladed arts, or is this influenced or based on the indigenous culture of the Pampas in South America?
Okay. The art, the core of the art, was brought over from Spain, and specifically from Andalusia. What happened is that they used different knives than they use in Spain, because at the time that it was evolving, the gauchos lived a cowboy culture. So the knives that they had were not knives that you wore on, wore like in your pocket or anything like that. They wore them on the belt. It was that the use of the knife influenced the subtle changes in the art. But the art was basically the Spanish art. Now, the other influences that come into it are with the indigenous weapons. As I said, it's a cowboy culture. So one of the things that they always had with them was a riding crop. The riding crop was used to direct the horse, and it was also used to help corral the cattle. So that became a common weapon in the offhand. They also, of course, used their poncho, and they also used the bolas, which they used for capturing runaway cows. So you had some native influences, but the modality was purely Spanish.
Very interesting.
Maestro Loriega, if I may ask you, the art, was there a formal way of training this art? Was this something like the traditional fencing that had a very structured curriculum and progression of training? Or was this something more of a rough and tumble kind of art that you just picked up being in that environment?
Yeah, between those two, I would have to say that it was more rough and tumble, because they did not train the way we mean training today. There were no gaucho knife dojos on the Pampas. It was a method that was learned informally, but it was one that they were exposed to at an early age. Charles Darwin wrote about this in 1830s. He noted that the children had no toys to play with, but the toddlers were given dull knives to entertain themselves with, to divert themselves with, while the adults were doing their chores. What this accomplished was that it familiarized the children with the knife, and it also desensitized them from the innate fear that, we in so-called civilized society have of the blade. That did not exist among the gauchos. The old gauchos were really self-impressed by this fact. When someone said to a gaucho, "I hear that you're a knife fighter," he would smugly reply, "I prefer to think that I have steel coursing through my veins." And so it was from an early age that, the knife was not an alien object to them. It was very, very familiar.
Amazing, the influence of culture here. Mr. Loriega, is it just the knife, or what are the other weapons that are taught within this? You mentioned a little bit earlier the poncho and the bolo and that kind of thing. What are all of the weapons taught within the system?
Okay, there are about 5 different knife configurations, and we're not just talking about size. 5 different types of knives that we use for 5 different things. So The smallest knife they carried was called a redijero. That's something like a 4 or 5 inch blade. They wore it in the inguinal area right in front of the fold on the side in front because it was short enough that it didn't get in the way while they were on the saddle. And that was a utility knife. That was for small cutting chores. Then they had the daga or the puñal, which of course is a double-edged dagger. And that would either be carried as a backup weapon or as a main weapon. The third type of knife was the cuchillo, which was the generic run-of-the-mill knife that was used for cooking and camping. It could also be used for fighting because it was large enough, but it had a designated use. For fighting, they used the facón, which was a little bit more sturdily built. Usually, it could have a metal sheath to really protect it. And the facón is what they wore on the back of their waist so that they could draw it quickly, even if they were riding. And then, because the gauchos participated in the independence wars, they carried a large knife called the caronero. The caronero is about the size of a Lee Enfield bayonet. It's like an 18-inch blade, not counting the handle. It was like a short sword. This they would not carry on their waist because there was a drag. They would carry it on the whole of their saddle. And so if they were on horseback, and they might use the caronero so they could reach down and fight against a standing opponent. So those were the main 5 knives. In addition to the knives, they had the 3 implements I mentioned. They had the poncho, they had the rebenque, and they had the bolas. All of these 3 other weapons were used, if they were used, in the raw hand. Now, one thing, since, you could have a variety of skill among gauchos. If you had a gaucho who was very, very well skilled, and for some reason or other he was going to engage a gaucho who was younger or inexperienced, the more experienced gaucho wouldn't even bother to take out his knife. He would defeat the younger one with the whip, with the riding crop, so as not only to spare his life, but to humiliate him in the process.
Maestro Loriega, this art and this way of combat, how has it been preserved? I mean, does it still exist until the modern day? And if so, what resources are available? Is there anything in writing, any books or manuals written about this method?
Well, although people, would romantically prefer to think that, that they were still gauchos, the fact of the matter is that, the gauchos started dying off in the last century, and meat production, which was basically their main livelihood, was automated. We don't, and even if you drive cattle, you only drive it, maybe from your ranch to the neighbor's ranch, because now, you put a cattle on a cattle train and you move it from Buenos Aires to Rosario or whatever. So, there's not that function anymore. Additionally, in the mid-20th century, all of this stuff, well, actually before that, knife fighting was highly illegal. So, it wasn't a question that you could fight with a knife. Is that by now, the law was so pervasive that, whether you were out on the ranch or on a cattle grave, if you killed somebody, they would get you. So you weren't so quick to use the knife anymore. So, you may have relics, you may have some old timers, you have some young guys trying to recreate it. but there are no schools, for Esgrima Criolla. It's pretty much a relic of the past. You might find an exception, but I doubt it. As to the legacy of it, the only book that was written on it was written around 1942. The author called it Esgrima Criolla, and so that's the name that stuck. But as I said, it's a modern term based on a modern book. It's not so much a book on fighting, it's more of an anthropological book on what the lifestyle was. It does have all of the weapons and all of the implements that he fought with, but there was more of a historical document. I've had it for about 10 years. An Argentine friend of mine gave me a Viva copy of it. But now it's widely available. You can buy it on Amazon. It's been reprinted. Other than Esgrima Criolla, there's a book called Del Facón al Bowl, from the facón to the bowl. It's a large book about large knives, and it's written by Abel Dominic, who is a very, very well-noted historian on age weapons, who happens to be Argentinian. He's also a collector. So in 1988, he came out with this massive book, and he deals with the knives of his country, but he deals with all large knives. And then more recently, a young man in Argentina who was trying to reconstruct the art also wrote a small book on the subject, but it's basically a rehashing of all the other publications that came before it. I myself have written a small manual that I just use with my students. It's about 50 pages. But, basically, there's no new information. So whatever information was there in 1942 is the information that we have now.
Amazing. Master Loriega, you probably explained a little bit of this already, but is the system only found in South America, like Argentina, or is it in other places like on the other side in Chile or Bolivia?
Okay. The system was practiced wherever the gaucho roamed. So it was exclusively practiced in Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil. Okay. Those three countries had major meat-producing populations and major gaucho populations. Those boundaries were always in flux. They having wars all the time. And the gaucho did not consider himself Argentinian or Uruguayan or Brazilian. He considered himself gaucho. Now, that's not to say that he didn't have ethnic pride, because many, many gauchos fought in the independence wars in Argentina. But, they had their own allegiance. Other than in those three countries, you didn't have gauchos, so you didn't have Esgrima Criolla. That is not to say that other South American countries don't have a knife art. They do. But the gaucho system was limited to the three countries where they lived and where they rode.
Maestro, in your school, you teach, to your students lessons on Esgrima Criolla. What structure do you have for teaching at your school? What weapons are taught there?
Well, basically, I don't teach every type of knife. We just use a generic knife, a large bladed knife, and we use the poncho, and we use the riding crop. We obviously don't use bowlers because they're indoors. I do do these workshops once or twice a year for a whole weekend. So we do like a 10-hour workshop. And for the workshop, as you know, Fernando, I'm really rigid on people understanding a subject academically as well as physically. So they get reading material, they get PowerPoint, they have to identify the different types of weapons, they have to identify elements of the culture. We draw parallels between the gaucho and the cowboy and the vaquero from Mexico. And then once we get past that, we get into the meat of it. So, we use a cold steel rubber bowie, or some of the guys will go to the 99-cent store and buy an 8-inch kitchen knife and dull it down and blunt it, and they'll get a riding crop that you can get for $10 at Amazon. And with the bowie and the riding crop, we can do the Esgrima Criolla. Or the poncho. If you have a cape, you can use the cape. Most students don't have that. So we use a large bath towel. We wrap the towel around the arm, or we flick it in the guy's face, and we get a good semblance of what Esgrima Criolla is. At the end of the 2 5-hour days of training, my guys know more about Esgrima Criolla than most Argentinians because, basically, we've covered whatever there is in 10 hours.
Amazing. Master Loriega, what's the structure that you're using to teach within your school?
Well, so what we do is, once we get past the technical stuff, we go into basic from the ground up. We start with the grips. From the grips, we extend into the guard, the stances. Now that you have the proper grip and the proper guards, the true guard, the false guard, then we go into the cuts. It's primarily a cutting art. Beyond the cuts, we then go into the different thrusts. And at the end of the thrusts, we work on the footwork and on tactics. And everything else is just practice, one-on-one, maybe some drills. We don't like to do drills too much, but we do one-on-one. We do 1 against 2, 1 against 3. And so pretty much that's the structure that we use incrementally until we get all of the components in.
Master Loriega, is there the short follow-up question to that is, why do you do it that way and not in a different system, like maybe an Asian system where they use katas or formalized routine from the get-go?
Well, quite simply, because what I'm trying to do is a cultural immersion where I'm trying to duplicate it the way that is relevant to the Argentinian. I'm very I must say, a great deal about not mixing systems. I don't want to mix Tanto Jitsu with Navaja. I don't want to, throw in some Southeast Asian drill, even if it's a good drill, to an art that doesn't include those drills. So I like to keep them very pure. And so when I'm doing the Esgrima Criolla, I'm doing it within the environment that art was practiced in, and not introducing what would be alien elements from another art. This is why I always say to whoever I'm teaching that, I'm not espousing any art. There's not a better art. There's not a worse art. I teach Navaja. I don't say that Navaja is superior to Tanto, or that Tanto is superior to Bowie. That's for the practitioner to decide. But when I give it to the practitioner, I want to give it to him as traditionally as I can.
Maestro, you talk about maintaining some purity in the way you present material, and kind of keeping in that way of thinking. I'd like to know if you could tell me, what is purely, unique to this system of fighting? What have you found in your research that is different, or a unique variation of common techniques that we see in other blade arts that you find in Esgrima Criolla?
Okay, well, first of all, the most salient aspect of Esgrima Criolla is the focus on el visteo, the eyesight. And that's actually a two-pronged study. You study not to blink and not to be deceived. And then you study how to do that to your opponent. Now that by itself is a constant component of the training. And we can get into how that's done. I want to say, though, that that component of the training, the importance of the eyes, that also is an element of Spanish knife fighting, and it's well documented. But I think that in Argentina is where they refined it to an art. I'll come back to Visteo. The other thing that I find unique about the training in Esgrima Criolla is the progression of dueling type activities that actually existed in Argentina. In Argentina, they had three types of duels. They had duelo de floreo, that means flowery duel. Duelo de floreo was among two friends on a Friday or Saturday night in the camp with all the other friends, and they get drunk, and one guy says something about the other guy's sister, and they have a mock duel. They're friends, so they're not out to kill each other, but they want to resolve it. So one of the things that they do is they can take either a knife, or they could take an ember from the campfire that's still on fire, and they can have a duel with it. And the winner will be determined by watching his physical moves, and the men will judge who was a better fighter. Okay? So that's a training method that duplicates reality. Now, if we're not drunk next week, and one of us says something about the other guy's sister, then we're going to go to the next duel, because now we're not playing. So now we're going to go to duelo a primera sangre, or first blood. And that's where, as you all know, you fight, and you fight until whoever draws first blood does it, and he's declared the better fighter. The reason why dueling to first blood always goes to the face is twofold. You want to make sure that the guy knows he's been cut, and you want him to be reminded of it every day of his life when he looks in the mirror, that he doesn't forget that you were the better fighter. Okay. But that's, again, for things that are not necessary for the taking of a life. That would be the third duel, and that would be duelo a la muerte, or duel to the death. The reason that that's also an element of training is because the young boys who are starting out will see these things, and they'll see what the natural outcome of a duel to the death is, and they'll learn what people fight over, what they don't fight over, how they fight when they're fighting their best friend. So all of these duels are elements of learning the culture and the system. They have a third element that is used for training that is unique, and that is in the way they practice their cuts. By and large, the gaucho was illiterate. He didn't know one letter from another, but he was numerate. He knew how to count because he had to count cattle. So on off times, what he would do is he'd go out to the back and he'd take out his facon and he'd do the numbers 1 to 10 in the air. So he would cut number 1, vertical cut. He'd cut number 2, a C cut with a backslash. He'd cut number 3, and so on, all the way through 10. 10 was the Roman number 10, so he would do an X, like we all do an X, number 1 and number 2. And so by doing the numbers 1 to 10, he developed hand and knife dexterity that he would use later in fighting. So, these are some of the ways that are unique to Esgrima Criolla training. Going back to the restale, to the development of the eyes, I said that I came back from Spain. In the old salas de animas in Andalusia, the novices, the guys who weren't ready to fight yet, would be given things to do to develop their skills that were not dangerous. And one thing, you may have heard of this, was to go and stoop in front of a large bucket of water, and you punch at the water, and the water would splash in your face, and little by little, you would stop blinking when the water splashed in your face. So at some point, the instructor, the maestro, would come over and unexpectedly hit the water while you're peering in, and he would watch whether or not you blinked or not. And then the next thing would be, what can you throw water at your friend's eyes, and it's being feeble. And then after that, it would be your open hand, that you would stop short of slapping him in the face, but bring it as close as you can and see if he blinks, and he would do the same thing to you. Then they go to flicking the shirt in each other's faces. The whole point would be to kill the flinch reflex. And if you didn't do that, the next guy that you fought would stick a cape in your face, and while you were blocking it, he would be gutting you in the stomach. So they considered the ability to keep track of everything that happened of the ultimate importance.
Amazing. These training methods, Maestro Loriega, are things that are similar, culturally different, but similar technically to things that I come across in Japanese martial arts, which is my background. Other than these cultural differences, can you somehow make a neat comparison to an Asian bladed art like anis or something like that?
Yeah. Well, I have to say, and I don't mean to be disparaging, but Esgrima Criolla is extremely rudimentary. It's very gross motor skill. In fact, it'd be just the perfect art for you to teach in the military today, and we don't do that anymore. But if you wanted to teach an art that people can get in boot camp, I would teach Esgrima Criolla because it's just so grafted onto the gross motor movements that we make. There's very little sophistication. It's not like Tanto Jitsu. It's not like armies with sophisticated weaving or complex cutting. It's what you see is what you get. Now sure, it has its ruses and it has its tricks, and you can fall for those tricks if you're not aware of them. But those are basically the same tactics that the gypsies or Native Americans would use, kicking dirt in the eyes or whipping the poncho at the head or smacking him in the face with the riding crop before you thrust the weapon. And you see that all of these ruses, these tricks that are used, are all centered about the face, the eyes, about blinding the person. Why is that? Because the gaucho knows that his opponent is not going to let him walk in and cut him or stab him, and the only way he's going to be able to do that is by distracting him and preventing his opponent from seeing what he's doing and doing it in that second. So it revolves around that, but it's just that.
Interesting.
Maestro, I have a question for you. The physical, techniques and tactics, you've given us some background on that. Is there any other element to the art? Is there any spiritual or philosophical, side to the training?
Well, Renan, I can't honestly answer that because there's no one around who really practices that today. But I wouldn't think so for now. And why do I say that? Well, because the gaucho prided himself on being a self-sufficient rebel. He would say that he has no need for higher being or higher sense of evolution. He just wants to ride, eat, drink mate, dance, have sex, sleep, and do it again the next day. So, I don't know of any, and I could be wrong, but it would not fit the persona that has been documented of the gaucho anthropologically and sociologically. So I can't say this for a fact, but I don't think there's a philosophical or spiritual element in the training.
Maestro, another question I had is revisiting the weapons that are used, and specifically the poncho. I'm curious about it. Is the poncho used in the same way as the Veronicas in the Spanish system? Is it used like a sarong in some of the Southeast Asian systems, or was it just used more as like a distraction tool?
No, the poncho in Esgrima Criolla is almost exclusively used as an armor, as a shield. You might flick, and I've seen accounts where, and I've seen illustrations as well, where the gaucho will allow his poncho to trail, hoping that you'll step on it and then he can pull it out from under you. But I think that that's ridiculously transparent and childish. I mean, no one is going to fall for that. You're going to be careful not to step on a poncho. You're going to be careful not to compromise your balance. So by and large, there wasn't any whipping tactics that were used. I think that when you see a fabric wrapped around an arm, the culture where it was most practiced was in the gaucho culture in Argentina. I think that if they were looking to do any kind of blinding, it would be with the the rebenque, with the riding crop, because first of all, that has a better reach, and also it's semi-rigid, so it's easier to direct than a flexible fabric. Okay, so if you want to hit the nose, you can hit the nose with the rebenque. You don't know where the poncho is going to hit because it's large and it's billowing. So that's just my sense of it.
Master Loriega, is a lot of this, the majority of everything that we've talked about today, has the cultural tie with the gauchos. And coming from, as you explained, the art coming from a part of Spain that is renowned for its wool, textiles, and ranching, and then once it goes to South America and it becomes established in a geographic area where people do much the same thing, this art seems to be very well suited for that. Has there been offshoots or things of the art that has kind of branched away from that culturally, or has it always been, like you said, stay very rudimentary and very functional for this livelihood that it seems very well suited for?
No, well, again, given the fact that I don't believe that it's in practice anymore, I don't think that it has, branched off into anything new, like a neo Esgrima Criolla or something like that, or Gendai form of Esgrima Criolla. One of the things that saddens me, Hanjiro, is the fact that everybody wants what the other guy has. So here in the United States, we all lust after the martial arts, say of Japan. And Japanese lust after baseball. It's like the grass is always greener on the other side, and I've seen that in all my travels. And so I found the same thing in Spain, that here they had the whole Andalusian legacy of the Navaja with the culture of honor and manliness and all of that. But you go through Spain and everyone's practicing Japanese arts, Filipino arts, and doing the stick work and the knife work. It's like, they, to them, I guess, it's what they don't have, so it's what they want. And the same thing happens in Argentina. They're all about being loud about, the arts that come from the East, and totally disregarding of, what they have in their own backyard. But, that's not just the Argentinians. That's us. That's the Asians. That's everyone who's in martial arts is seems to be doing that. I've met a lot of military combative guys, and I can name names. These guys are military combatives now, but they grew up doing their katas and their judo and jiu-jitsu, and they were completely unmindful of their fathers who had learned and practiced combatives in the war, and they thought combatives, that's not too simple, that's Bruce Stegner, and then they have come full circle, and they have found that sometimes simpler is better. And, I don't say that they abandoned the arts that they trained with, but they now learn to extract from karate, to extract from judo, the things that were put in combatives to make it a war art. Combatives was not, so you could, take your girl to the dance and fight the bullies. Combatives was what you did when you were behind enemy lines and your gun ran out of bullets. Okay? So I'm finding this. We're all guilty of it. And some of us find our way back and some of us don't. And it's okay either way. But I guess that's just a long way of answering that, there hasn't been a new direction in Esgrima because everyone is preoccupied with something else.
It's an amazing and fairly insightful statement about a large part of society and not just the study of martial arts, Master Loriega. I appreciate the time that I had to talk with you today, gentlemen. I need to get going in order to fulfill my daily duties. But Master Loriega, thank you very much for sharing your time, answering our questions, and continued good luck and success and long life in studying these arts. And I hope that we get to learn much more from you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for making it over. I know you have a busy schedule. I've heard good things about you, and I look forward to continue our conversation and to meeting you sometime soon.
Very good, Master Loriega. Thank you very much. Mr.
Have
Fernan,
a good night.
Thanks much. Take care, gentlemen.
Good night.
Well, Maestro James, I want to thank you again for being on the show. Before we wrap up, can you please tell the audience where they can contact you if somebody wants to find you for classes, if they want to bring you out to their school for a workshop, or even pick up some of your books? Where can they reach you?
If they want to contact me, the easiest place where everyone gathers is on Facebook. And if you just type in civilian steel, I'll be sure to respond to any requests, any questions, anything like that. My books are exclusively sold through Paladin, so you can order them directly through Paladin or through Amazon. They're generally not found in bookstores because Paladin chooses not to distribute. So they control all the sales. But if you go to paladinpress.com, you'll find them all listed there. They're in hardcover, rather in paper, or in ebook. So, my future ones will be at Paladin as well. So you keep watching.
Excellent. And if they're in New York City and want to find you for lessons, where can they go to visit you? Where's your school located?
My school is located in Brooklyn. It is at 609 Avenue X in the Sheepshead Bay area in Brooklyn. If anyone's coming to New York, again, they should let me know through Facebook, and I'll make it a lot easier in terms of directions for them.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Maestro James. I really appreciate you being on, and we hope to hear back from you real soon.
Thank you, Fernand, and thank you to the audience.